Hi everyone, my name is Owen Magabinawo and welcome to HYVA. Today I have Vibehab Dumkumwa from nurturehq.com. Wow, I did get the name pronounced
Yep, you got
correctly,
it.
right? Well, okay. So the reason for today's interview is really about trying to figure out ways for us as entrepreneurs to focus on what's most important to us in our business. Some would say that would be the core competencies and stuff like that. And when it comes to sales, some people don't really want to be out there trying to make the sales. And so I figure is there a way to properly outsource some of the sales for your business, be it B2B or B2C, whatever. And so I said, why don't I get the expert on this topic to come on here and talk to us how exactly we can do that. So go ahead, Vibe. Can we introduce yourself to the community first of all, and just
Sure. So my name is Vaibhav Donkandwar, and I'm the founder and CEO of Nurture. The website, like you said, is nurturehq.com. And what Nurture does is it's basically a very easy to use marketing automation hosted application for businesses of all sizes. When I say all sizes, we are focusing on small businesses and mid-market, so we're not in the enterprise space at all, just because as a SaaS business, we're trying to build something that is usable by a wide number of people. And just regarding your outsourcing for sales and marketing question, I think Nurture plays a big role in the sense that the way I like to look at using technology, if you can replicate what a person has to do. So for example, an inside salesperson who makes calls, follows up and with emails, phone calls, voicemails, and things like that. How can you take some aspects of it so that that single salesperson, instead of being able to handle just 50 leads, how can he handle 500? Right? And almost equally efficiently. So sometimes outsourcing is not just about outsourcing a human function to another human organization. It's about thinking about how do you do a particular function more effectively using technology, or somebody who is really good at doing that particular thing, much better, faster, and cheaper than anybody else, right? So
yeah, and that's a good point you made because I always tell people, say, when you want to outsource, you look at it from first of all eliminating anything you don't need to do in the
exactly.
first place, and then after eliminating the tasks you don't need to do, figure out what you can automate, and then when it comes after the automation process, really trying to figure out, okay, what can you now delegate so you can focus on what you love the
Absolutely.
most. So I see your point in that, and like I said, I told the community initially with this interview is that some of us might not be so interested in just picking up the phone and just calling up cold leads out there. So it might be the case that we want to delegate this task to somebody else who can help us, who has the necessary sales skills to help us get the leads from being cold to warm
Exactly.
lead. And I'm trying to figure out during this interview, how do we outsource that
Right.
process and get to the point where we're talking to people that will want to be talking to us in the first
Exactly.
place. So
So
where do we
right.
get
So let me
started?
break it down. I think that's a great question, because I think sometimes we can talk about individual things and it just doesn't add up to somebody who a business person who's like, well, should I listen to this interview and what can I learn from it? Right. So I think when you break it down, you take any business, right? And let's talk about B2B, because that's what I specialize in. You basically have this requirement of saying, okay, who are my customers, right? That's number one thing, as in, if you're selling into software companies and you're selling into VPs of engineering, then how do you say, okay, what is the list of my companies? Who are the right people? So the very first question is identifying your prospects, right? And I'll just kind of lay down the few steps, and then we'll go back and saying, to discuss how you can outsource and kind of leverage technology as well as outsourcers to kind of get it done, right? So first step is finding out who are my buyers, who are my decision makers, right? The second step, how do I reach out to them, right? And if you look at it, I think there are really a couple of different angles there. One is you can reach out by email, you can reach out by voicemail, and you can reach out by telemarketing calls, right? And to your point, most business people just don't have the time, or even sales reps, they'd rather focus on warm leads that they can convert rather than trying to just cold call and hunt through, leads that they have nothing that they know about. right? So that's the second part.
Yeah.
And then the third part is, very few times in B2B, it happens that you call a customer and you close them in the first one or two conversations. So there is an aspect of maintaining contact. And if you look at most
Yeah.
small businesses, even if they are just working with 200 customers or 200 prospects or 100 prospects, it's just impossible for a small business CEO or an owner to keep in touch with them, right? So I really think of
Yeah.
sales and marketing as these three parts, right, which kind of support the sales process, right? There's obviously the whole closing and all those things, right? But these are the foundational elements that kind of make a business build a sales machine that they can rely on, right? Now, if I were to dig into each of these, and I think I have been very close to these three things in the last several years. So I'll just give you my perspective and then you can ask me questions. So I started a company a few years ago called Ready Contacts. And what Ready Contacts does, we kind of figured out the market in the first 1 or 2 years, kind of did a few different things in terms of helping B2B marketing managers. But then what we narrowed down on was helping companies identify their decision makers. That's it, right? So even for your particular business, let's say you're looking for busy entrepreneurs, right? Who have a lot of virtual assistant needs that you can say, hey, we can do it better than anybody else. But then how do you identify who those customers are, right? So Ready Contacts basically works with companies and marketing managers to understand the target accounts and requirements. And it can go from the example that I just gave you to companies like Akamai and Cisco and others who are saying, hey, we are going after this market. Here are our decision makers. We're looking for people in IT responsible for security, right? So what companies do is they basically outsource this function, right? And businesses can basically, whether you use, Ready Contacts or anything else, I'm just giving you an example from my experience, but you can essentially look at that function of finding your decision makers as something that is very critical to your sales process, but it can be completely and should be outsourced to a company that can do that very well, right? So then, if you knew that, hey, this is a busy business individual who fits my requirement, you're more likely, and you have the full contact information right in front of you, then you're more likely to pick up the phone and have a conversation with them, right? So that's the first step. The second is, like I said, the whole aspect of reaching out. And I think this is how we kind of connected initially through that thread. But the reach out process, there are a couple of different angles. One is, I think you can outsource to a...
Before we even go to the second step, I really want to see how we can really make this the first step even more concrete. Because you said how you need to spend the time to really identify who your ideal prospect is, so that in order to hand over the contact to somebody else to help you do the contact. But then there's a thing of some people might have issues really breaking down that process of really identifying who the ideal customer is. Is there a way, or maybe by example of stuff that you've done in the past, that you can share with us how you were able to break down who you should be speaking to in the first place?
Sure.
So we can learn from
Sure. Let me kind of give you a couple of examples. And let's say that you're a small business who sells voice over IP systems into other small businesses in your region, right? So your requirement is identifying who those small businesses are, right? And there are a bunch of resources for it. And it's not that you cannot do it, but like we said, it's all about focusing on what gets you revenue and delegating or outsourcing everything that doesn't help you scale, right? So it is about, so you're saying, okay, I'm in San Francisco area and I want to build a list of customers that are on the road most of the time. So, contractors, home service companies and things like that. And I want to find out the contact information of the owner, considering these are small businesses, right? So how do you build that information? How do you get email addresses and phone numbers so that you have identified your decision makers very, very specifically, right? That's one example. If you look at kind of slightly larger businesses, let's say you have a software company that is selling into financial services or credit unions, and they want to reach out to the person who is in charge of IT. Right? Now, what happens is there are very few lists out there that can give you that level of information, right? So how do you kind of say that, hey, this is my requirement, and you could actually spend a lot of your time or your inside sales team's time in just, going through the whole process of
Trying to dig up
exactly, and
information.
the
Yeah.
output of it is not opportunities. The output of it is just names, and then the real work starts,
names,
right?
yeah.
So the problem is it's not very scalable, because the pressure on the inside sales of the sales team is about revenues, and they're sitting here discovering who to speak with. And that, I think, is the core reason that I think the knowing your decision makers, who are my buyers, what is the ecosystem of business decision makers that I need to target, is something that you can best outsource. And there are a number of solutions.
And I like what you just said too. I like what you said because it made a lot of sense. Because one of the things I was doing recently is I said, you know what, I want to focus on real estate agents who specifically have at least 15 or more listings,
Exactly.
right? So that way I know they're actually in business.
Exactly.
And I found a list in which I was able to get access to those people.
Yep.
But then when I started making the calls myself, because I wanted to really understand the process of making sales to those people, I started doing the research, and what I found was I spent more time doing the research myself, not really making the calls.
Exactly.
And so what I did was create a process in which the system of how I do the research, I delegated to one of my VAs. Now he does the research, so I focus on calling the people. You understand? And I saw that I want to make that point more concrete to what to the listeners. Listen to what you just said.
Correct. No, that is absolutely well articulated, and that's a great example. It's exactly how you want to break down that sales process. And let's say if you're a small business owner where you're the main salesperson of the company, you should be absolutely focused just on anything that brings revenue and nothing else, right? And you should basically break down everything else and say, okay, how do I automate this, or how do I outsource this, right? And that's the best way to make sure that you are focused on revenue and revenue alone, right? So, so moving on to the next step, I think the next step is about, hey, how do I reach out to these decision makers? And let's say I'm a single sales guy and CEO, and I still need to target a large number of customers so we can grow, right? So the best way to do it is you can do a few different things actually. One is you can hire outsourced telemarketers to do it, right? And I think there are a lot of pros and cons of it. I think there are a lot of people who go through that whole exercise and they actually don't get any results, and they're very frustrated about that experience that they never try it again. But I think I'm of the belief that if you work with the right company and if you set up a correct process, right, then you can get a lot of what you really need, which is very qualified prospects who are ready to talk to you. Correct?
That's a good point you made. But how do you find the right people to work with? Because that's an issue a lot of people listen to this.
Yes. So I think there is no right answer to it. I think there are the whole appointment setting and telemarketing industry is extremely fragmented. And there are such companies in almost all regions of the country and abroad as well. So what you want to do is basically do some online due diligence, get referrals from your network, and then I would say identify about 3 to 5 that you want to talk to and test in some ways, right? And one of my main learnings has been that you got to be very specific in what you expect from them. Right? So what you got in the first step, give them that list of decision makers and say, these are real estate agents who have 15 or more agents. They are qualified prospects for me. And what I want you to do is call them, and you don't have to discover anything. I'm giving you who to call. And you focus on just asking 2 questions that helps qualify, and then push for a third one which says, do you have 15 minutes for a call next week? Right? It's very, very, very specific. And my perspective is that telemarketing is helping you warm up prospects. I'm not of the belief that others can sell what you have. You have to sell. Yeah, you have to sell what you have.
I like you. I like the fact you said that because the sales of the actual them buying the product is still going to be, dependent on you or your team. But this is really getting them to warm up so that when you get there, you're not feeling that friction. So I like what you
Exactly.
just said.
It's like, I mean, I'm looking at you and I cannot imagine that somebody else can have the same enthusiasm that you have and the energy that you have in selling your product versus somebody else. It's almost like, can you hire somebody else to interview me today? No, right?
I wish I could.
But you won't have that energy, or if you even if you look at the Mixer G interviews,
Yeah.
the person who's interviewing is a big part of the experience, right? And what
Definitely.
you are bringing to life here is difficult to outsource. So you can't get somebody to sell your product, right? In most scenarios, that's what I believe. But if you give them a very specific task, then I think you can be successful. And the output is
So
not only just an appointment; it also the answers to those first two questions, which kind of helps you qualify that.
and one of the things I'm always trying to do is make every point you say concrete. So we've given the example of how now I'm going after agents, active agents with at least 15 or so listings that they're listing to sell. And you're saying I give that list to the people that I've qualified that I want to work with, and we want to give them, two or three questions that they are going to, qualify the agents before they make an appointment for me. So I don't know if you can help to make that more concrete by saying, okay, what questions would they want to be asking on
Right.
my
So
behalf?
I think if you take this specific example, right? I think now you obviously know the business much better, but if I were to be in your shoes, I'd say, what is it that are the big kind of flags that you're looking for, right? Do they have an assistant internally at all? Do they have a lot of trouble finding people because there's a lot of churn? Are agents not being effective because they're spending a lot of time that can be best done by assistants, right? So obviously this is a
Yeah.
very qualitative explanation. You want to kind of condense it down to very specific questions, which could be, do you already have assistants and do you need more? Do you face problems finding assistants to kind of increase the efficiency of your agents, right? And have you tried outsourcing that? Which kind of gives you a sense of, are they open, are they not? Have they had a good experience, a bad experience? Which plays a big role as well. Because if you know that they've outsourced and they hate it, which means they have had a bad experience with somebody else, then you know how to approach them because you know that your company can actually wow them, right? So, but getting somebody who has had a bad experience with something, you want to deal with them completely differently, right? So it's like the appointment is one thing, but kind of gauging the perspective that the decision maker is coming from is actually another part.
Definitely. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead.
So I think those are the few things I would say. And then in terms of that, how do I reach my decision makers? So telemarketing was one. Number two is, I think this is something very interesting that may not work for all businesses, but you want to kind of try that as well, which is this concept of guided voicemail, right? So what guided voicemail is, you record a personal voicemail and have it delivered to the voicemail boxes, right? So now this is not the idea of this some of the voicemails that you get from carpet cleaning companies that, hey, we are in your area and we're the best carpet cleaning company and we are here tomorrow. Do you have some time or do you need your carpets cleaned? Right? It's not that at all. It's really about again, if you were to call 20 people and hit 18 voicemails and leave messages, right? So how do you kind of try to automate that process? And what you do is, you don't just leave the voicemail. You use a marketing automation system to then trigger emails as well. So you leave a voicemail saying that, hey, John, this is Owen calling from Hire Your Virtual Assistant and blah, 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 right? And then you send an email saying that, hey, I just left you a voicemail earlier this morning and wanted to just reach out and see if you have some time tomorrow. Right. So you kind of are hitting them with a 1-2 punch and saying that, hey, do you have some time? And again, a lot of success depends on the product, the relevance, and how good the content of your email and voicemail is. Right.
And I have a question about that point you just made, because to me that sounds like you're blasting out,
No.
calls to an email. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that like voice blasting, where you're blasting out the voicemail and then automatically also sending out emails? Is
No,
that what the
not at all,
case is?
not at all. So this is somebody. I mean, there are some companies that provide the service, but essentially they are calling, they are navigating through the phone tree, and then they're leaving a voicemail on your behalf, and and it's your recorded voicemail, right? And then you're using your marketing automation system to just forward, send an email which is very personal. So it's not going to be graphics or anything. It's just a very personal, simple email. And again, you don't want to automate anything that you won't do in person in real life, right? I think that's where people get it wrong. I mean, the question you asked me, it shouldn't feel like, oh, you're just sending out 1,000 voicemails. No, that's not the case at all. It's like, if you're sitting and following up with 20 leads today, what you're going to do is call them. If they don't pick up, which is going to be 18, 19 out of 20 times, you're going to leave them a voicemail, and then you're going to hand type an email to them. So what I'm suggesting is you can just do that same process, but automate it so you get the scale. Don't send it to 500 people. Send it to 20, right? So, but it helps you scale, right? Because otherwise you would have to do it manually, and you would have to type that email and things like that, right? So the human aspect of it is very important. I mean, sometimes the whole automation thing gets kind of misused from the perspective of, because the other person is human as well. So, and you can't forget that. Right?
Definitely, definitely. And so now they're making the calls on your behalf. I guess they're screening them to make sure they have the right kind of questions, and then I guess the next step is to set an appointment
Right.
with them, and then
Yeah,
take it from there.
and that's where you pick up kind of the conversation and really kind of get engaged with the prospects, and that's where the outsourcing goes away, and you're going to kind of lead from the front, right? But there's another thing, which is, let's say you have that first call, and it's a good lead, but they're not ready as yet, right? So then the next problem that you have is, oh wow, I have 50 leads from the calls from the last 2.5 weeks that are good, but they're not ready. And you already have 50 more that you're supposed to call later this week, right? So how do you kind of balance the nurturing of those previous 50 who are good prospects, right? And that's where a marketing automation or a lead nurturing application comes in. It's almost like an email marketing application, but with a lot of intelligence around building a conversation instead of sending a one-off email, right? So it almost kind of you want to take a very education-oriented approach. So to going back to your real estate example, right? You basically want to build a sequence of a few emails that helps them understand your service, or more importantly, helps them understand how their problems can be solved, as an example with your service, right? So you're kind of speaking their language, you're speaking what they wake up and think in the morning about the problems that they're having, right? And as long as your content echoes that, those 50 leads are actually hearing from you, right? And then you can do a second reach out, and that is very personal. It says, and they remember you. You're top of mind for them because they've been receiving a few emails that you've set up with the system, and you have not just sent a blast. You've actually segmented these 50 people and said, these are good prospects, and I want to kind of educate them to the next level, right? So a lot of, so when you're talking about outsourcing, when you're outsourcing to a telemarketing organization, it's saying that you're sending, you're asking another human organization to do something because they're the best at what they do. But outsourcing can also be done to an application or technology that can help you do the same thing very effectively, right? Like sending repeated, typing the same emails sort of a thing and personalizing them. So,
Wow, I like the way you're breaking this
yeah.
thing down. And so, I guess when you if you have the leads in front of you now and they've been qualified, they had those who obviously are not interested, so you're not even dealing with those in the first place. And now you're dealing with people who are interested, which could be two categories: people that are really pressed to get started right now, which obviously you'll be talking to them, trying to get them down the pipeline to actually buy the service, or people who like the service but are not right ready, and so they get put into the
Nurture bucket, yeah.
nurture email. Yeah. And I'm trying to really understand, like, what would be the sequence to use in regards to how many value content emails did they receive to you calling them back
I
again?
think, So I think there is no right answer to it, just because every business is different. Every segment of your leads is different as well, right? So again, what you have to think about, in my opinion, and that's what we are preaching our customers at Nurture, which is don't think of automation as a system that's automating whatever you want. Think of it as what would you do based on that segment of 50? How soon do you think you should call them? Right? And set up the system that way, right? So keep it very human. If you think that they're probably ready to buy in the next quarter, in the middle of the quarter, have a call to action that goes into your CRM system or gives you an email alert saying that call John, right? So there's no right answer to that. At the same time, I'll give you an example of a company that uses a system like this. They actually have a free trial option, right? So when customers sign up for a free trial, and it's a service, it's not a product, right?
A
Yeah,
service free trial. That's awesome. Probably need to talk to them how they do it. 'Cause
yeah. So what they do is when somebody fills out a form saying that I want to try your service, a personal email goes out from the sales rep saying that, hey John, thanks for your interest. I just had a couple of very quick questions before we can set up your trial. Do you have 15 minutes for a call tomorrow? Right? Now this is automated. And what happens is that if you see, inbound leads and their response rates, everything depends on how soon they are contacted. And since your email is now going out to them very non-intrusively, a few minutes after they filled out that form, they actually look at it. And in this particular case, they actually reply saying that, yeah, tomorrow is perfect. Or no, I'm not there tomorrow. How about Wednesday? Right? So it's doing a couple of things. Not only are you getting them to tell you when to call them, but it's also kind of implicitly building a conversation before you actually talk to them in person. And that personal conversation then becomes a lot more or a lot less cold and more warm, just because you've had at least an email exchange. It makes a big difference, we've seen, right? So that's an example of automating something that honestly, if you were to respond by looking at that lead and email personally, you will never respond every time within 5 minutes. And your response rates from the person saying that yes or no will keep falling the more time goes between your reply, right? So that's just another example of, how do you want to follow up and how do you want to automate that?
So I guess the point I got from that, how you follow up, is really looking for, I don't know what the word I'm going to use. Like, will I say key points within their own? You understand the life cycle of this. Maybe you're in a specific niche. You understand the client. You understand the specific needs that they have. So you're looking for things that indicate that they have a certain time where they're going to need your service
Correct.
the most. I don't know the word
Correct.
to use. And then based on you identifying those times when you think they're actually going to need your
Correct.
service the most, is create your sequence of follow-up based
Exactly. And,
around
and,
that,
and,
I
and
guess.
just to that point, I think maybe I can clarify it this way, that as you're sending those emails actually can have some call to actions as well, right? So whenever they are ready, sometimes you will see that they click that call to action which says, hey, I want to sign up for this trial, or I want to speak to somebody at your company, and things like that, right? In your real estate examples, there might be agents who just had a bad morning just because an assistant didn't come in, or their still lagging on hiring a couple of people that they desperately needed, and your email shows up in the inbox and it says, oh yes, why not, right? I want to talk to you guys. So I think it's some of those indicators that you have to look at, and kind of schedule your calls accordingly. Now, what these automation systems also help you do is they help you understand what the leads are doing. When are they opening their emails? When are they clicking on links and things like that, right? So you actually know when to call whom, even if they haven't clicked the call to action, right? So
That's a very good insight because seeing people tend to be kind of like creatures of nature. So if you send them an email, you can actually see when exactly they
yes,
open the email. I guess that gives your salesperson insight as to, okay, if they open an email at this time, they're obviously in a computer available next to a phone. Maybe I should call them at this time to
exactly.
next.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you said it right. You probably don't want to call them right then, because that's kind of a little, strange, and they'll probably not like it. But you sort of understand that it's you want to take all those things as indicators, right? Indicators of interest, indicators of availability, and then schedule your conversation accordingly. And again, at the end of the day, if you look at all these things, the first, second, and the third step, they're basically helping you as the CEO or the sales rep to talk to your prospect and have that conversation about opportunity. And these are all three things that, using a human organization or a technology, you can automate and kind of set it up for your business the way it works.
Definitely. And so I guess now we're at the point where we're nurturing them, we're sending them out the email. So is what next should we do about
I think the cycle kind of repeats, because what comes out of these three processes, if you're using appointment setting, then you have an appointment, which is where the sales team picks up. Or when you're in the nurturing cycle, you're looking at indicators for free trials, talk to me, call me, or clicking a few set of links, and then you're picking up those indicators and calling them. Right now, once you call them and it doesn't go anywhere and they're still far away, it goes back into the nurture cycle. Right. So I think these three steps are kind of fundamental, and in my mind, just enough for most small to mid-sized businesses to make sure that their sales teams are kind of focused on generating opportunities.
Definitely. And I like the way you break everything down, and you really, you said first of all it's really appointment setting, and then all the way to sending out maybe I'm missing out the steps, but you're sending out the emails next and looking for indications of how are they interacting with what you're sending to them. Are they clicking on the link? Are they saying they want to sign up for your free trial and all that? And I get all that, but there also is a challenge of, if you are trying to outsource the initial parts of this, which is your appointment setting, how do you get the people you're trying to work with to really understand your product and your service, so that they can really get that information to the potential
Correct.
buyer and not look like
Right. And I think so. It's very simple, right? I think it's what I would always assume is that most other people, right? And you can't generalize that, but most other people cannot sell somebody else's product as well as the company that owns the product can sell it. Right. So that assumption, I think, is very key to successful outsourcing of telemarketing. And like I said, you want to define very specific objectives of what you need them to do and what you need them to essentially, you know, um, achieve from those calls, right? So those questions, like I mentioned, and I think there is training involved. So you're absolutely right that there is an amount of training where you go through, you explain them, number one, who the buyers are, what kind of companies these are, why would they be interested in the product that they are pitching, right? So that should be inherently very well understood for them to, kind of explain it in a very natural fashion, right? And I think training is really the key to that. And other than the fact that the process should be broken down, it should be very objective in nature than very qualitative, as in they can have a conversational approach to the conversation that they're having with the leads, but they should identify specific data points that help you. right? So that the output
Definitely.
of that exercise should not be just an appointment or no appointment. It should be a lot more than that.
Definitely. And one thing that most people, when they think of outsourcing, I guess maybe because of the way it's been sold by a lot of people, gurus out there, it's kind of like, oh, you just outsource and you just let it go, and it's off your hands. And they don't realize there's a lot of management involved with the product. You just change your role from being the person who is implementing a task, the time consuming task, to now the person who's managing, kind of the implementation of that task by somebody else, or even automated by some machine or something. So there is a change in role from implementing to being the
Right.
manager. And I'm trying to really understand when it comes to outsourcing parts of this whole sales cycle to companies like that can help you with telemarketing and all that. What are those key things as the manager do we need to be aware of so that we can bring that to the engagement and really get the results?
Um, I think a lot of it is defining the expectations correctly. And so let me make sure I understand the question again. So your question is, how do you make sure that the outsourcing is successful, and what are the metrics to manage that? Is that accurate? Yeah.
I guess that's the easiest way to put my long
Right.
question.
So I think it goes back to saying what is it that we expect from it, right? And have we given the right input to that process, right? And the input to that process essentially is everything that they need. So in this case, a list of companies and contacts with their full contact information, so that the telemarketing companies completely focused on having conversations, right? And then for them to have good conversations, have they been trained very well? And then the third part is, have you defined very objectively what it is that they need to provide as a success or failure, or somewhere in the middle kind of a lead, right? So that even if they say, hey, I got a lead that is not interested, you still learn a lot from it, right? And it all boils down to numbers. You give them 500 contacts, they make X number of calls, they leave Y number of voicemails, and then what do you get out of it, right? So a lot of it is about, if the person outsourcing is very clear about what he or she expects from that whole process, and that everything is very well defined in terms of numbers, right? Then I think you will always be successful.
Well, I like that because it's really telling people, it's really a thing of really breaking down your entire sales cycle to from no matter how complex you think it is or simple, you need to really break it down to the point where it's so easy. You can just put on the table. This is how I get people from prospect all the way to sales,
Correct.
and trying to figure out, okay, who should you assign to certain of the aspects of the
Right.
of the of the system, or what should you automate?
Correct, correct. So, if as a small business owner, you can literally say, hey, I want to first identify who my decision makers are, and I've kind of defined this profile, right? So how do they go to a list company or a company like Ready Contacts and build out those decision makers with complete contact information? Then they go to a telemarketing company and say, hey, here's my product, test them, make sure they're able to pitch it well, they understand it, feed them that list and say, here's the output that I need. And on the output, then they call just on that output, so that on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, they are working with that output, which is the best use of their time, right? And most importantly, what happens is they've created a funnel that is not dependent on them, right? Because they're going to have a lot of busy weeks, some weeks that are completely unscheduled and things like that. So if everything depends on them or their inside team, then some of these processes are going to fall apart, which means your funnel is kind of going to look really bad, right? Here, the contacts are coming, the telemarketing calls are happening, and then your sales team is following up, right? And obviously then you have the nurture process. So I think it's obviously easier said than done, but once you get into the discipline of it, it is really about starting it, figuring out what is not working, and then fixing those parts. Because obviously you start, and the first time, obviously a lot of those things are not going to work because you're still discovering several aspects that you don't know at the beginning.
Wow, I like the way you've done all, taking time to answer this question of, what's it involved with outsourcing of sales. And one of the things I always try and do when I talk to every entrepreneur that I interview is, we're all busy and I'm figuring out why take the time out of your busy time, your busy day to actually be on this call to share all this great information with me.
I think I'm very passionate about the space itself. We have multiple products in the space with Ready Contacts and Nurture, and I think it's very exciting, honestly, for me just to help any business figure out sales, because I think sales is really very central to business being successful. And for me, I think the process and a scalable process is what I'm passionate about. Right. So we ourselves, I mean, we have two or three different companies, and each of those companies have an extremely scalable sales process. Right. So we are able to do a lot more with very little. Right. And I saw that you've interviewed Rand from SEO Moz as well. And at Ready Contacts, we get most majority of our leads are inbound leads, right? So depending on a particular business, I would definitely recommend all of the viewers to kind of listen to that interview as well, because that is a great source of, the first problem that I told you, which is how do I identify people who need my product or service, right? So besides the fact that you can build a list based on your understanding, the other big source, a very valid source, is people who are searching for it and coming to your site, right? So just so many different angles. So I think, just to answer your question again, I think I'm very passionate about sales systems and how do you build sales systems that scale. And I think that's the reason I'm here.
Thanks, man. And just I always want to end all these interviews with that point that hits home for the person listening to this so far. Someone listen to this and figure, they know what they need to do, but they're just a little bit overwhelmed by how do they put all the systems.
Right. Right. So I think if you, my personal experience has always been, I mean, for most small business owners, I think sales is at the top of their mind every day, and more revenue. How do they acquire more customers, right? And I've been in situations where I have had the same problem, and I've realized that I am so involved in thinking about the problem that I'm not spending enough time solving the problem better than what I was doing at that point. So my advice would be just with a fresh mind, just reevaluate your customer acquisition process, right? And really look at it in three buckets. So how do I identify who my buyers are? How do I reach out to them? And how do I nurture them, right? So identification could be, are you doing SEO or not? Is that relevant for your business? Are you doing, are you buying lists? How are you identifying? Are there better sources for you to do that, right? So there is the top end of the funnel that you're saying, oh, I have more people that I think are relevant for my business, right? And then saying, okay, I'm doing all my calls myself. I had this telemarketing experience that did not work out and I gave up. So reevaluate those things, right? The guided voicemail and email approach, reevaluate and try it. So not every solution is going to work for every business, but it's very important to test and see what works, right? So it's all about testing, measuring, and seeing what works, and do more of that. Right? And then nurturing, I think I realized that very few businesses actually nurture, right? I'll give you a simple example. Tax and accounting services companies, right? They're always looking for new customers, but very few of them do any nurturing, right? For example, in January, I get that whole, they have the software system where they send you this thing where, it's a software that you download and fill out all your information for your taxes, right? And send it back to them. Rather than that, I don't hear from them, right? What if
Yeah, you made it a good point. Yeah, you don't hear from them.
What if they had a nurturing system which just send them simple alerts that, hey, your state tax is due, your city tax is due, this is due, that is due, are you aware of this deadline, and things like that. And always have a simple call to action saying refer a friend, right? So there are so many opportunities. Not only are they kind of locking those customers for life just because of the experience, they are kind of converting them into silent salespeople who might refer new customers to them. So whether it's dentists or real estate agents or anybody, I think they can do a lot more with, modern digital marketing strategies that are really here to help them scale. And it's all about scaling, right?
Definitely. I'm trying to pronounce the name again, and I just messed up. But Vabhab,
Yep.
I got it. How best can the community members listen to this so far? How best can they get a hold?
So the best way to get hold of me is you can look me up on LinkedIn, just so that it's available for everybody. They can look up the exact name on your website, and believe me, I'll be the only one that comes up, so there won't be any misunderstanding. But other than that, you can email me directly, and my email is my first name Vaibhav at nurturehq.com, which you can include, I guess, in your in your interview post. And I think those are the best way to reach me. Email is perfect.
Thank you very much for doing the interview.
Thanks for having me.
So welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I really want to know what exactly you think. I mean, if I suck and if I'm not doing a good job, I want to know, because by your input and your comments, your suggestion, your feedback, that's how I'm going to improve on the entire package of what I'm sharing with you. I really want to improve so that you know that your time is well spent when you watch my videos. And if I do good on interviews, and if you like certain things I do, please let me know so I can even improve upon that as well. And I want to thank you really, because your time is well spent, and I mean, your time is important to me, and I want to make sure that I continuously put this information in front of you. So I want you to join my community, and in order to do that, you need to click on the link that says get the free ebook, enter in your name and email, and you will receive as a gift from me my free ebook titled The Entrepreneur's Guide to Running a Business in the Cloud. The reason I do that is because I want to share with you that information. You can check it out and make use of it in your business. In the same vein, I will be sending you email updates every time I have new blog posts, as well as if I have new stuff that is not even on the blog, I want to share with you. That way we can stay in contact. One more thing. Before you go, I want to also let you know that if you are really serious about finding, hiring, training, and even working with virtual assistants, if right now you want to get that started, why don't you sign up for my free webinar where I share everything about the entire process? And you can get to do that by clicking on the link on the very top of my blog where it says sign up for the free webinar. Again, thanks for watching the video, and I hope to see you next time.